Aloha, I'm Dr. Sasha Lessin. I'd like to tell you about an ancient love story that involves these people that you see on the screen. To the left, Enki, who became the chief scientist of the Anunnaki, who came to Earth 450,000 years ago. He's also known as Lucifer. NINMAH, the chief medical officer. She's known in the Bible as Lilith. And Enlil, the commander of the Earth gold mining expedition to Earth, who later becomes Yahweh. So this is their story. It's got a background. The background is that the atmosphere of the planet Nibiru was getting ruined. It has a huge orbit from its primary, which is a red dwarf called Nemesis, far, far away. And it takes 3,600 years to go from around Nemesis and through our inner solar system between Jupiter and Mars. It used to be every 3,600 years. And the volcanoes that had kept its atmosphere sort of blanketed from the extreme cold and heat was blowing away, was gone, partly as a result of thermonuclear war, where they blew a hole in it, and partly because it was just dissipating because the volcanoes weren't working anymore. And so this was a crisis, and the king at the time refused to do anything about it. He just, his scientists said you could float monoatomic gold up in the atmosphere, and that would make a shield for us. Or you could take some of the nukes that left over from the North-South War and drop them down the volcano, and maybe that'll start the ashes going in the air again. And the king's wife said, nah, just pray. So he didn't do it. He didn't get the gold. And finally, one of the princes, he descended from a concubine somewhere along the line, a guy named Alalu, got the other princes who felt the same way together after years and years of everything getting worse. And they crashed the gate, and Alalu chased this guy, LAHMA, the king, up this to the tower, and he threw him off and yelled, "I'm king now." And the guy who would have been king, the pretender, the next guy, the crown prince, Anu, said, "Hey, you can't be King Alalu just because you killed the real king, King LAHMA. It's my turn to be king." And Alalu said, "Look, I got all these princes with me. You can make a deal. I'll make you my number two, my cupbearer. And your son, Enki, Lucifer, your son will marry my daughter, Damkina, and the child of Enki and Damkina, that is my daughter and your son," says Alalu, "will be the next king after I am no longer king. And we won't have to have another civil war." Anu said, "Okay, I'll go for it." So Enki married Damkina, Alalu's daughter. That was the deal. There's the representation of Enki, with sort of water flowing from him. We'll see why a little bit later on. He's associated with water. But his name as the bearer of water is Ea, which is the first two letters of Earth. Earth was named after him. So the king broke off his marriage to his his engagement to his half-sister, NINMAH, and instead married him to Alalu's daughter, Damkina. And they did indeed have a kid, a son named MARDUK, who is going to now be the next king after Alalu. It was all set by treaty. Anu had to break NINMAH'S engagement to Enki so that Enki could wed Damkina, but they were still in love. Damkina and Enki wed. There's an ancient representation of their getting together, marrying. And they did have this child, Marduk. He's the legal successor to King Alalu, and he's going to be very important in the history of Earth. He was raised to rule Nibiru when Alalu's reign ended. His whole life was built around, you are going to be the king of Nibiru. Well, Lilith, or NINMAH, now she doesn't get together with her beloved fiance, Lucifer, Enki. So she goes to another brother, Enlil, the military commander, who later becomes Yahweh. So NINMAH, Lilith, has a child with Yahweh, Enlil, and the child's name is NINURTA. It's a representation of NINMAH. Later on, she's known as Ninharsag when she's in between Egypt and Iraq, and in Egypt she gets known as Hathor and so forth. Names change. There's some representations of Enlil, or Yahweh, becomes commander of the expedition to Earth later on. Representation of here's Yahweh, Enlil is getting his chance, and here's NINMAH attracting him, and they're going to make a baby. And Anu, the guy who was the next in line to the throne, becomes cupbearer. And he thinks that's going to be a big honor, but it turns out that Alalu just uses him like a servant and humiliates him whenever he can. Anyway, he does his best for a while, gives Alalu a chance to see if he's going to save the planet. He serves as cupbearer. Alalu tries to nuke the volcanoes, but that didn't yield enough ash to really protect the planet, to plug the hole in the ionosphere. It was unsuccessful. He sent a rocket to Earth. And the records show there was lots of gold in Earth and the asteroids, but the craft hit an asteroid and everybody, crew of 50 were killed, prospectors. So that didn't work either. And so finally Anu said, you know what, you've given up, Alalu. You tried two things, and I am going to take my turn as king. I hereby challenge you, man to man, strip down. Let's get in the middle of the square of the capital and invite everybody to watch our fight, because we're going to fight for the kingship. Alalu says, ha, yeah, you ain't got a chance, bro. They fought naked in the air, and they're crashing against the doors of the houses and breaking all kinds of things. Two very, very powerful, gigantic guys. These guys are both, 9-10 feet tall at least, maybe more. Alalu won. Everybody says, yay, Anu won. And not Alalu won. Anu won. And everybody carries him off on their shoulders. And Alalu, meanwhile, remember, Alalu killed the last king, and so he thinks Anu's going to get him killed, so he slinks off, steals a rocket ship that they used to nuke the volcanoes, and has the nukes in them, and he flees to Earth. He lands at Basra on the Persian Gulf. There's a map shows you where that is. I'm sure we all know where Basra is nowadays, but that's where it all started. So he's the first Anunnaki to land here in Iraq. And in those days, a lot of what's now underneath the Persian Gulf was a marsh, and that's where he landed. He sets a communication to Nibiru and says, hey, I'm here on Earth, and I've got gold to save this Nibiru, and I've got missiles to destroy you, and they're aimed at you. I want my throne back, and then I'll save the planet. Give me back my crown or die, says Alalu. So the military council says, you know what, we better send Enki. He is the son-in-law of Alalu, as well as you, your King Anu, your son, and maybe he can make peace between the two of you again. So the council sends Enki, in those days he was known as Ea, with 50 men, and he's driven, his rocket ship is driven by a guy named Anzu, and they're heading for Earth, seeing if they can make peace with Alalu. There's a representation of Enki contemplating this journey from Nibiru to Earth. And now they approach the asteroid belt. Now, Alalu had gotten through the asteroid belt using nuclear weapons. And so Anzu, the pilot, wants to use nuclear weapons in the craft that Enki's riding in to blast asteroids. And Enki said, no way, this makes holes in space. We can't do it, and it just messes everything up. I want you to divert all the water in our systems, and we'll make a water cannon. We'll just blast the asteroids that get in our way out with our water cannon, and just take it slow and blast them. We're out of water now. The ship's heating up, says Anzu. Enki says, land on Mars. There's lakes on Mars. And sure enough, they get out. They need their oxygen mask. There's some oxygen, but there's lakes and drinkable water. And they proceed to Earth after they cool down their ship. And they make peace with Alalu. They call him Earth Commander, and he's feeling good about this. They make camp. The first week of camp, they work for 6 days, and they're not used to days being that fast. And you remember, a day in Nibiru is 360 days of Earth days. And so here Shatner has been good enough to show us what it's like to have landed. But the week is based on their report in the ancient literature of 6 work days and then a day of rest and celebration. That's how we got our week. So back on Nibiru, Enlil, who's Anu's heir, now that his daddy Anu is king, saying, hey, I'm supposed to be your heir, Dad. And you gave this good job to Enki to run things on Earth. I don't think he's got enough gold. Send me, Dad. It should be my job. And he starts pestering his father. And so Anu sends him too. Okay, so he gets there. He starts, Enlil gets to Earth, to Basra. And he starts quarreling again with his brother Enki about who's going to be the boss on Earth and run the gold mining operations. Anu is getting more and more uptight. He's supposed to be king of everything, he thinks. And so Anu himself decides he's going to fly to Earth and take care of this mess. So he gets a rocket ship. Here's an ancient depiction of him rocketing to Earth to settle all this. They have a draw. And so as soon as Anu gets there, he has his son Enki and his son Enlil and himself draw among 3 straws. Anu gets 3 straws, holds them in his hand, and he says, you know, one of you might even win to be king of Nibiru. I'm willing to risk my throne too. Now let's see what we draw. Of course he fixed it. Anyway, Anu from the drawing got Nibiru. Enlil got to be commander of Earth, and this was deliberately fixed by Anu because he considered now Enlil was his heir. Enki got the job of doing all the work, a lot of it anyway. He got to control travel in the seas and all the mining operations, and he got control of Africa, where most of the gold had been found, that these guys found. And Enlil was so pleased with being the lord of this expedition, he gave to Enki the land that they created their first week in, Eridu, right by Basra. And this was, he just gave it to him. This is yours forever, even though it's in my turf. Well, Alalu, who's been watching all these Anu and his kids draw for all the positions. Say, hey, what about me? I'm supposed to be king of everything. This is it. And so they drew for jobs. Alalu watched it. He just couldn't believe it. He realized that Anu had cheated and he was retaining the crown of Nibiru. And so Alalu says, I want a rematch. Let's fight out for it again. And Anu said, okay, I know I can beat you. And sure enough, they fight again on Earth. Anu wins, puts his foot on Alalu's chest and says, see, I'm king. And when he relaxes a little, Alalu raises up and bites off his manhood. That's what the ancient text says. Owie. So Enlil catches Alalu, ties him up. Enki gives first aid to his dad, and they put dad on a rocket, and he's going back. Alalu says, he says, you know, look, take this guy who just bit off my manhood, and I don't want, he's going to die slowly because I take this stuff for, if anyone, you know, gets too intimate with me without my permission, they don't have the antidote to what I eat. So he's going to die slowly, but I want him to suffer. Put him on Mars, just abandon him there. But Anzu, who had driven the craft that Enki took, said, hey, you know, he's Alalu's my kinsman. I'm willing to be with him while he dies, even die with him, because I want to honor him. And so Anu is really impressed. And so when they get to Mars, they drop Alalu off to die there, and they leave Anzu there. And Anu says to Anzu, look, if you survive, by the time I'm going to send my daughter back here, if you're still alive, I'm going to send her with 20 men, and you're going to start a base here. I'm going to use it for transshipping gold from Earth because it doesn't take as much thrust to get off of Mars. So he leaves Anzu there with the dying Alalu. And so Anu gets this whole fleet of gold freighter rockets going and all kinds of stations along the way, but the most important one is Mars because it's right close to Earth. Anu then sends his daughter with 50 female doctors to Earth. She's going to be their medical chief. And he says to her, stop at Mars. And if Anzu's alive, give these 20 guys to him to work for him to create a base there. So there's a ancient representation that Sitchin etched of a tablet that shows NINMAH with her symbol, a thing that cuts the umbilical cords. We'll get to that later, and some of her female practitioners. And they're on their way. They go to Mars en route to Earth. When they get to Mars, Alalu's dead, and she decides to honor him. So she and Anzu make this gigantic statue of Alalu's head at Sidonia, and his eagle helmet is pushed back so that he's gazing at Earth. He was the first Anunnaki, the first Nibiran to come to Earth, and that's Sidonia. And she leaves Anzu and 20 men to start the Anunnaki's Mars base, where they're going to transship the gold they get from Southeast Africa. That's where they found most of it. So in the meantime, we have now the three lovers, the triangle down on Earth. There's Enki, Lucifer, the chief scientist, NINMAH, chief medical officer, and Enlil, who's commander of the expedition. And both these guys want to have a male child with her. They see themselves as establishing a whole civilization on Earth. Enlil gets her first. He says, NINMAH, you know, come hang with me. I'll bring our kid, NINURTA, from Earth. He really wants to see you, and let's make a brother for him. Well, they didn't get together successfully. We don't know why exactly. You can guess. The real reason was probably she was in love with Enki, as we now know. So she leaves ENLIL, and she rockets to Sinai, where Enki has got a nice little retreat going. In the meantime, ENLIL, Yahweh, is really bereft. He had one kid with NINMAH, he wanted another one. She's gone off with his rival, and he moons around. He's really uptight, and he sees one day, bathing in the river, NINMAH's cousin Sud, and he invites her to have some drink with him, and says he wants to get it on with her. And she said, "No way, I'm a virgin, and you're a gigantic guy. I only have a small sex, and I don't want to." And he just laughs, and he rapes her. Well, NINMAH, when she finds out that her cousin's been raped by him, she calls a council. The council votes to banish ENLIL Yahweh to Africa, and they send Enki's private pilot, Abgal, to take him to some place in Africa where he's not going to, for this terrible crime of rape. The Anunnaki and the Nibirans were real free with sex, but they did insist on consent, and they could not stand rape. So Sud got pregnant from this, and everybody's saying, "Hey, you know what? If we can get him to agree to marry you, will you drop charges?" And she said, "If he promises never to have sex with anybody but me, and be always faithful to me, and make me his queen, then I would consider it." And she does. And she does indeed marry him, and he's allowed to return to ruling the Earth gold mining expedition. He marries her, and now her name changes from Sud to NINLIL. That means the wife of the boss. Enki, in the meantime, gets together with NINMAH, and they have a wonderful affair. The problem, he's trying to get a son with her, but she keeps getting girls. But Enki makes the most of it, and first he has sex with the daughter, and then he has sex with the daughter's daughter, and he has a lot. He basically likes to make kids with people. Well, this is pretty upsetting to NINMAH, that her daughter and her granddaughter are falling in love with this guy, and then he drops them after a while. He doesn't sustain a relationship with them, and she's really uptight about it. She goes off and she meditates. In the meantime, Enki gets into her psychedelic garden, and he starts eating all the experimental plants, and he gets real sick. People call for her to come back. They find her, and she saves him just in time. But that really messed up their relationship. They go on in various forms through the rest of their life, interacting in various ways. But one of the most intriguing things is that they assume different identities in different eras. And one that we'll explore in our next presentation, or next few presentations, is how Glenn Bogue has shown that in all probability, the person known as Jesus was indeed Enki, or Lucifer. To be continued. So we're the Lessons, and we write books about the Anunnaki. We have all kinds of Facebook and MeWe accounts where we give you some of the info. We have YouTubes. You got to learn about the Anunnaki, because they are the ones that gave us the problems we have now, the perks that we have now, and they've made certain promises, of which you'll learn if you stay tuned to us. Thanks for listening.